students. Today I am going to narrate you a story from your module first semester second. The title of the story is Lost Forests. It is written by a Danish author, Jonas V. Jensen. He was awarded the Nobel Prize in Literature in 1944. So let's listen to the story carefully. Cora was the name of a man who tilled the soil. When he had saved money, he went to town to buy a slave. The dealer showed him several slaves, but Cora was not satisfied. I suppose you want me to drag them all out here? The dealer grumbled. It was noon and the slaves were all asleep. I can always go elsewhere, Cora said simply. Well, the dealer pulled the chain and slaves filed out sleepily. Cora looked at them all, examining each one very carefully. Phil, this one is a fine husky fellow, said the dealer, and pushed one of the slaves forward. What do you think of him? Hasn't he a powerful chest? Strike it and see. And look here at his wrists. The tendons are like strings of a violin. Open your mouth. The dealer thrust a finger in the slave's mouth and turned him toward the light. Now you will see some teeth, he boasted. He drew the back of a knife across the slave's teeth. Look, those teeth are like steel. They can bite a nail in two. Cora bethought himself at a wife. He ran his hand over the slaves appraisingly, pressing the smooth muscles with the tips of his fingers to see if they were firm. Finally, he made up his mind to buy him, paid the price with a scowl, had the slave unmanacled, and took him home. Before many days had passed, the slave fell sick and began to pine away. Now that he was no longer in the market, but had settled down permanently, he began to long for forest whence he had come. It was an excellent sign. Cora knew. Symptoms. One day, he sat down beside the slave, who was lying flat on his back with no interest in life, and began to talk thoughtfully to him. You shall get back your forest, never fear. That I promise you. You can rely on my promises. You are still young, you know. If you will till my fields for me willingly and industriously for 5 years, I will give you your freedom, even though I have paid for you 5 years. Is it a bargain? And slaved worked. He took hold like a demon. It was a joy for Cora to sit in his doorway and watch those muscles knot and quiver under his brown skin. And Korah did this for many hours a day, for there was nothing he would rather do. He began to realize that the body is a beautiful thing and a delight to the eye. 5 years the slave figured as many solstices as he had fingers. The sun had to turn 10 times. Every evening he watched the sun go down and nod. When the sun had turned the first time, he counted on the thumb of his right hand. After the passage of another solstice, and it seemed an eternity, the index finger was free. Those two fingers he loved above the others, which still served to mark his bondage. Thus, telling the days, the passage of time became the religion of the slave, his inner wealth, his spiritual treasure, which could take from him or dispute with him. As the time passed, his calculations expanded, became broader and deeper. The years drove by as great boundless abstractions which we could not grasp. But with every new sunset glow, the slave recreated his hope and reconsecrated his faith. Time, which was evanescent in the present, appeared interminably. Once it was in the past, and the future seemed infinitely distant. In such wise, the slave's spirit was deepened, as his longing brought infinity into time. Into time, so his word became infinite, and his thoughts boundless. Every evening, the slave stared thoughtfully into the distant west, and each sunset brought more and more depth into his soul. When finally the 5 years had ebbed away, it is so easy to say the words. The slave came to his master and asked for his freedom. He wanted to go to his home in the forest. You have been a faithful worker, Korah admittedly meditatively. Tell me, where is your home? Is it in the west? I often watched you staring in that direction. Yes, his home was in the west. It is far away then, said Korah. The slave nodded. Far away. And you have no money, have you? The slave was silent, dismayed. No, that was right, he had no money. Look you can get nowhere without money. If you work for me for 3 more days, no, let it be true. I will give you enough money for your travels. The slave bowed his head and went to harness again. He worked well, but no longer did he keep track of the passing days as formerly. On the contrary, he gave away to daydreaming. Korah heard him well and babble in his sleep. After a time he fell sick again. Then Korah sat down beside him and talked to him long and earnestly. His speech sound prudent, full of wisdom, as if grounded in the honest experience. I am an old man, he said. In my youth, I too longed for the west. The great forest beckoned me, but I never had money enough for the journey. I shall never go there now, never until my spirit goes there where I die. You are young and able, and you work hard, But are you any stronger, abler than I was in my youth? Think about all this and hearken to the advice of an old man. See to it that you get well again. But the slave mended slowly. When he took hold again, it was not with the old enthusiasm. He gave way easily now. His ambition was gone. He liked to lie down and sleep between jobs. Then one day, Cora whipped him. It did him good. He wept. So the 2 years slipped by. Then Cora really gave the slave his freedom. He went forth into the west, but months later he came back in a miserable plight. He had not been able to find his forest. It might be that your forest lie in the direction. Do you see? Said Cora. Didn't I warn you? But no one shall say that I am not good to you. Try again, and this time go eastward. It might be that your forest lies in the direction. One more the slave set forth, this time with his face toward the rising sun, and finally after long wanderings he came to his own forest, but he knew not them. Worn out and defeated, he turned his face to the west, came back to his master, and told him that thought he had found woods, great woods and small, they were not his own forest. Cora cuffed. Stay with me, he then said warmly. While I am alive, you shall never lack for a home on this earth. And when I have been gathered to my father, my son will see that you are taken care of. So the slave stayed. Cora aged, but his slave was still in his prime. Cora fed him well that he might live long, kept him clean that he might be in good health, and at reasonable intervals whipped him so that he should be meek and respectful. Nor did he stint with rest. Every Sunday the slave was free to sit on the top of a knoll and stare out into forest. Korah's farm yielded in abundance. He purchased woods and cleared them and put them under the plow that his slave might have work. And the slave felled trees with will. Korah was wealthy now, and one day he brought home a female slave. The years passed, and in Korah's house there grew up 6 stalwart slave boys. Like their father, they worked diligently. Only when one is working does the time pass, their father told them. And when the time has passed, weary, we are born into the everlasting forest. Every rest day he took his sons with him on the knoll where they could watch the setting sun, and he taught them logging. Korah was old and decrepit. He had indeed always been old, but now there was nothing of him left but age. His son had never been strong, but they had nothing to fear from anyone, for each of the slaves could fell a man with one blow of a club. They were splendid fellows. The flesh was tight on their iron muscles, and their teeth were like a tiger's. But the times were safe enough. The slaves swung their axes and felled the trees.